It's more than just a word change, gentlemen and lady. It's a significant modification being proposed here.
Well, I would beg to differ with you just to touch on that.
Sure.
Because it does not change the opening part of the sentence with the 5-year funding plan as a base. That's a definite. It just suggests, I'm suggesting that simply because I do think that we are going to need to look at alternate forms of funding and decide whether they're available, make sense, and are usable. I think we're probably going to be looking at some real, much more solid projections than what's in the current 5-year plan projection financially. Once we have the engineering evaluations in and the general manager has together some numbers. Right now, we have $2 million for the country club and $2.5 million for the yacht club in that 5-year projected plan. That may or may not be enough. It's right there, Pete. I've got the plan sitting here. if you want
I'll
to
respond to
show
it when you're finished.
Well, you know, but that's those are the numbers that are in the capital forecast for those things. We might want to be in a position where we're looking at both capital that we have in hand and have raised over the years, along with intelligent use of borrowing or bonding or some other source of funds in combination, so that the real solution for paying for these things when it comes to the point where we have to pay for them is with money that's not going to break the bank for us and the people who live here. We'll spread the cost of these things out a bit so that they're being paid for as they're used, and doesn't double up the works with a lot of depreciation expenses rolling back in, because that is the thing that happens the minute that we pay for a building. Don't forget about that. It's a fairly complicated accounting process that, and I'm not an accountant, Pete is. Pete can go through that forever and explain it so that we all understand it if you need to. But all I'm simply asking for is, please, let's look over the edge of the box. Let's make sure that we find a way to say to the general manager, this is the year to open up the doors a little bit, and not just get stuck in, we're only gonna fund these things one way.
Terry.
Help me understand, because I must be missing it. So the way it's written now doesn't say what you just said. The 5-year plan plus any additional alternative kinds of funding.
If you wanna say any additional forms of funding, I'll be perfectly happy with that. But additional forms of funding simply say to me that we're going to raise or plan on raising assessments more than we have already in our 5-year projection to raise the money. And I would very much like us to be looking at sources other than simply raising assessments to do that from reserves.
I don't read it like that, but everybody has their own interpretation.
Yeah, we're arguing
But
semantics here.
I agree with Pete, I wouldn't change it to alternative, because you are kind of saying that you're forgetting the base, but if you put the word any in there, and if you think that's more specific, saying your perception or your understanding is that's just one type of funding, additional is just one type of funding. If we say any, that means we're gonna look outside the box, correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Right.
The 5-year or 10-year plan is not something that's set in stone. It's something that every year changes to a certain degree. I think the boards, when they put this thing together 3 and 4 years ago and started thinking about it, rather than hitting people with a big special assessment all at once for the things we need to do, were wise enough to spread it out over 5 or 6 years. The thing that people forget is, even though the economic conditions today affect every one of us, and we don't want our assessments to go up, including me, because it affects my wallet just like everything else, those same economic conditions are putting a burden on this homeowners association and our business just as much as they are as the average person. And as difficult as it is to sometimes to bite the bullet on those things, the spreading out of what we're going to need to do over the 5 years or 6 years is a little easier on people than if it was hit all at once. Secondly, There is no reason, and we have in the past, that alternative forms of financing these things are not on the table, because we financed half of the pool down there.
Pool cover.
And that's something that could easily be done at any time, and I don't think it's necessary to put it in writing, because it's something that's always been on the table and we've used in the past.
The word alternative means something different, pure and simple. You look up the dictionary, alternative means something different. So, something additional or whatever, fine. But if you're looking for something alternative, then in my mindset, we're saying we're looking to do it differently, scrapping what is being done and doing something different.
Let me summarize something there. I don't think there's any, is there any disagreement around this table that we clearly want to have other, I'll use the third word, other forms of potential revenues to take care of facility needs we need? Is there any disagreement that we need to look at those things? Pete?
I have no disagreement in looking at them. In looking at them, it's not clear to me whether or not they're necessary, all right? Now, obviously, we need to be looking at them, all right? But for anybody to think that the lack of continuation of the current plan puts us down a different path, I think we need to revisit the current plan. So alternatives in the future, absolutely look at it. But you know what? It may be that this plan, if carried out to its conclusion, will provide all or most of what we need over the years to come. Now, I say that with the 5-year funding plan, Dan, and others, was married up with the 10-year facilities plan, okay? So the 5-year funding plan, let's make no mistake about it, it raised the dues $30, $4 of which was for deficit reduction, and $26 which was specifically allocated to the separate component of the replacement reserve account. The intent there was to raise about $3.8 million over this 5-year period. $220 year one, $440 year two, $660, $880 million one. The total was 3.3 for facilities, for replacement reserve, and $500,000 for the deficit that had accumulated over a 3-year period of time. So what we're talking about, Tom, is evaluating, and we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen what the needs are. All we know is where the 10-year plan task force left off a year and a half ago. And it left off with something like $6 to $7 million. I don't think our buildings have gotten better since then. I don't think our needs have decreased since then, but we have a lot of decisions to make. This continuation of the 5-year plan to year 4 and then 5, and the intent was to raise it $26 specifically allocated to the big ticket items, and then freeze it at that level. Now, future boards will determine what happens 4 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. All I'm suggesting is that if we take this and continue the 5-year plan up to the 5 years and then evaluate it during this period of time as to how it compares with the needs, I dare say we may find the need for loans, we may find the need for other assessment revenue, but we may not. We may not. So the answer is yes, we need to evaluate alternative sources, but in addition with this, very clearly here, ladies and gentlemen, there are those in the community who say, put the kibosh on the 5-year plan, terminate it, end it after 3 years. I don't agree with that, and I hope this board doesn't agree with that. Let's at least have a modicum of long-range planning here for this association. Going back 6 years ago, the board then recognized the need, talked about the need. Here we are today, we've got 3 years into a 4-year plan, 5-year plan, and I'm simply advocating, and this proposal here is advocating, that we start with that base. Let's at least the $26, let's continue, it's working, let's continue it, and what we have to do beyond that remains to be seen.
Bill?
I think what we have to come to grips with is we want to choose the most fiscally responsible manner in which to take care of the assets of our community. There have been all kind of alternatives to the reserve plan thrown out there. There have been people suggesting we should just do a special assessment to everybody if we have something that we need to build. Well, on a $2.5 million project, that would be approximately a $300 special assessment. With the diversity of our community, I don't know if that would be a wise thing to do. We have people say, well, we should just borrow the money. Well, borrowing is going to, as far as fiscally, is going to cost you more money than if we can pay for it outright because of the interest factor. So, the $26, if we look at our own individual situations, in our personal homes, whether you still have a mortgage banker you're dealing with or not, a escrow account's being maintained to take care of the needs of and future needs of your home. I look at the reserve funds as an escrow account for all these major facilities that we own. $26 increase amounts to 50 cents a week. The contribution of increasing your personal escrow into this community, which we are all stakeholders in the facilities that we own, 50 cents a week. And I don't want to give up 50 cents a week any more than the next person. But to maintain the facilities and what we have, I think 50 cents a week is something that we can probably deal with.
Terry?
Are we discussing the funding plan, or are we discussing this document?
No, that's where I was gonna bring us back to at this point. What this document basically is, in a nutshell, you put it into one sentence, it basically says, and I'm gonna paraphrase it, I think this document is saying to the general manager, we know you're working on reassessing the costs of the various buildings. The 5-year funding plan is still a foundation and a base going forward, but it is not the only form of ways of paying for this change and upgrade that we want you to look at, and we are actually calling for you to look at any additional forms, potential funding, as well as the 5-year plan. So we're not throwing out the 5-year plan, but we are saying, put into the mix other opportunities if they're needed. We're not voting the 5-year plan up or down here. We're simply saying that additional forms need to be looked at, but don't throw out the 5-year plan. Dave?
I believe
Welcome.
that wording, you know what, I ran out so fast. But, yeah, I apologize, by the way, for that.
That's
but,
okay. Only thing you missed was the Pledge of Allegiance and the
That's
hanging of
important to
those.
me. Yeah, the thing we're discussing here is
That's not the
key
right
points, that's not what I'm looking for.
It's under capital budget, Dave.
No, you're not looking at the.
I'm not
funding.
looking at the right paper. Right, get me wrong paper.
It's capital
Yeah, I've
budget.
got my own.
You'll see
I
my
just-
note where
Yeah, I just wanna
suggestion
make
was put
sure.
the word alternative, and now
Yeah,
it's
well,
put the word
capital budget,
any.
yeah, I should almost know it by heart.
Okay.
Continue with the capital funding plans. And I believe that that's not good guidance. And I believe that what we should do in place of that is suspend the capital funding plan until we understand what it's going to be used for. I think we've gone for a period of better than a year where we have made zero progress in terms of the initial purpose of the plan, which was the renovation of our capital assets, the major capital assets. Now you might say, and I've been a big supporter of the plan, I might even say I had a hand in creating the plan.
You did.
As a way of building up reserves that I believe are necessary. I believe are necessary to fund these future needs. I mean, the needs are really not all that future. As a matter of fact, they're right now.
That's right.
I mean, so, now, some things happen when you're projecting, so what we think is a big problem for bridges turns out to be maybe somewhat of a smaller problem, although we still don't see our bridges fixed, do we? And we really don't know exactly what, there's a lot of uncertainty that's associated with this. But if you're making reasonably big estimates, you can kind of at least put a bound around it. the biggest estimate, and a lot of it went into the yacht club. That building's falling down. It's falling down, in my opinion, it's falling down in the opinion of a lot of others. And I believe you're at a point where, I mean, I think we did make, and the board approved of a case for rebuilding it. And certainly a major renovation, certainly a rebuild. There were some that argued that, hey, no, we could do it for less and we could just, fix it up. Even that was a major deal, a lot of money. So at any rate, we need these monies. On the other hand,
Actually,
it's-
that's what this says.
Yep, got it right.
Yeah, it says the integration of the costs.
But you know what, there's a responsibility that goes along with that too.
Okay.
If you're gonna say, I'm gonna collect this much money from you over this period of time, and we're gonna put this money in the pot to do something with, then you have to do something about it. I mean, you need a real plan to be able to do it. And Bill, let me say, $26 a year, how much do you come out for a week and
50
everything like that? Well, there's a couple of things you're forgetting about.
What's
It's
that?
not $26. It's $26 the first year, it's $52 the second year, and then by the third year, you're collecting. And by the way, what happens in the sixth year? Do we drop the assessments by the amount we've collected? No, in the sixth year, as we well know, and planned, you're gonna be collecting every year all of that, what is it, 138, divide that by the amount. In other words, this is still a significant amount of money. Now, Ray brought up something and said, well, he was talking about the funding, I know, we can still look at opportunities for loans and stuff like that, if that's the only question. I think I don't care, and I think it's not an important question. When we think it's reasonable to borrow money, we'll borrow money. We thought it was reasonable for the skateboard park, and we did it. You mentioned the pool, though, which kind of brings up another issue. I mean, you do have the opportunity to both collect this money and spend it on purposes other than, I won't say misspend, but spend it on purposes other than we've told people the reason that it was being collected. In other words, you can collect this money and you can have 5 years from now a yacht club that has fallen down or is condemned.
I'll get to it.
So, I believe until we have and get back on track and have some kind of a reasonable plan, my vote will be not for this guidance and not to approve a budget that has this collection in it.
Bill?
Well, if you'd have been here at the beginning of the meeting, Dave, you would have heard me ask Bob exactly when we can expect the business plan with regard to what you're speaking to. And he did state that he's looking to have some special meetings just with regard to that sometime at the end of November. Is that correct? Thanks.
Pete?
Yeah, let's be very clear. The plan was developed in year one, as has been suggested, $26 allocated to the special component of the replacement reserve account. The next year, year two, was $440, 26 plus 26 is 52. The third year, which is the year we're in, the 52 increased by 26 to become 78. That's going to produce $660,000. We have spent during years 1 and 2 all the monies raised. The entire $660,000 raised in year 1 and 2 has been spent. It's been dispersed. The most significant project was, of course, the Swim and Racket Club, which came as a surprise. We have budgeted within this year, which is the third year of the 26, to spend about $600,000. We're projected to be in deficit. That project has been questioned by some, whether or not it will be carried out or not. The general manager, I think, has indicated that if not that, it's because of the higher priorities in relation to the overall needs of the facilities. So that I think the general manager projecting forward, I don't want to speak for him, but I've gotten that indication that we will end this year with having the need to spend additional monies between now and April 30th out of that fund. But let's fast forward it. Year 4 would produce another $26. It would be up to, oh my gosh, $104, absolutely. That'd be $880,000. Dave, I understand your frustration, and you and I have shared from time to time with each other and in public, the frustration of here we are, 2.5 years after the 10-year plan task force was created, not having approved a single project other than, of course, the general managers, prior general managers, expending the $500,000 on the swim and racquet club. Here we are, we've got this major effort underway, and we as a board will be soon engaged in the process. We then talked about it the day before you arrived, about having a special meeting and so forth, and getting underway. But everybody acknowledges, nobody disagrees, we're gonna have to spend in this community major dollars on our physical facilities, which are 40 years old. There are different ways to approach it. This is one way. I remember my fellow director, Dave Stevens, at a meeting a couple of years ago, saying to the then general manager, stick with the plan. The plan is working. But I understand we need to do
The
both
plan
parts.
was working.
The plan was working. And then, yeah.
Okay.
It's still working in the sense of raising the money, and your point is that we don't have a specific plan yet to spend that money.
And by the way, if we have one at the end of November, and if we all agree that without a specific and approved plan that makes sense to fix the major targets that we had at the outset, if we all agree that if we don't have that, that we shouldn't give that guidance to the general manager, then why shouldn't we put the words contingent upon an acceptable and an approved plan in there? Or should we just, what you're doing or suggesting, Pete, I think it's just giving blanket approval without having a plan, whether you have one or not. We're gonna take that money and we're gonna spend it and we're gonna put it away anyway.
Dave, is there any doubt in your mind that we are gonna need millions of dollars going forward the next several years for major capital expenditures?
There is
Any doubt whatsoever?
There is serious doubt in my mind that we may not need that money because we don't even have the capability to develop a plan to spend it. That's,
You're
And that's-
you're addressing the boards and the association's management and board
part and
together.
parcel of the whole problem.
Inability to develop and get on with a plan.
That's
You're not
correct.
challenging the need for the dollars, you're challenging
Do I
our
think-
ability to put it together in a comprehensive way.
Do
Is
I
that
think the
correct?
building could fall down? Yeah. Do I
Yeah,
think it
do you
could
think
be-
the building could
do
fall
I
down?
think-
Yeah, but
do
we
I
need to
think
raise the
county-
money.
Do I think the county could? No, I think what you have to do is, first of all, figure out exactly what we need to do and what we will do to fix that building. And don't just collect the money without having that in place.
We won't collect the money, by the way, until May 1st of next year.
All right. Topic on this, well, I think we've all had
All
our
right,
say.
let's
It's
go on.
not- I'm gonna have my say.
Yeah.
I agree with the adding the word any to the additional form so that it's very clear that we are looking for other forms of funding. I think this document very clearly states that the costs of implementing the major repairs and renovations as outlined in the Facilities Action Plan it needs to be the cornerstone of the capital funding plan that comes back from the general manager. I think it clearly states there then that in the capital budget request that we expect our general manager to bring forward is that we'll be against revised and updated numbers of what it's gonna cost to do things, not 3-year-old numbers that were the basis of the initial 5-year plan. It also states at the last paragraph that business plans will be required for all major proposed budget enhancements, including referencing, obviously, the facilities having to do with the capital budget. So we're not here to debate the budget itself at this point. We're here to the budget guidance. Capital budget section of this clearly, in my opinion, states the general manager is to update the costs, bring forward an action plan to get going, and that additional forms of funding also need to be looked at.
In
That's my-
addition to the
that's my-
$26,
Including the-
in addition to the
5-year
$26
plan is the
built-in
base.
increase in the 5-year funding plan.
The general manager this is our guidance. The general manager has all the options in the world to come back with a totally different way of funding the facilities as he thinks they ought to be done. He's got the freedom to do that. Our guidance
And we have the
is-
freedom to reject every
we
bit
have
of it.
the freedom to reject it. At that point.
Well, let's try and be somewhat organized
other-
as a group, you know, and
Any
work
other-
together, not at opposite ends.
So I'm agreeing with Dan that we need to include the word any. to
Any
that-
additional form of
any
funding?
additional form. so
Insert
that
the
it's-
word any in front of
so
additional,
it's-
right?
So it's clear,
Okay.
and we've all had our say at this
Okay.
point. Operating,
The rest is easy.
well, we
I
do
don't think
have,
so.
well, wait a minute. We
Go ahead.
do have and I'm trying to connect the dots here, but there was a part I know from the Budget and Finance Committee, an effort they've got going on for tracking the capital budget requests and whether the money is actually ever spent the next year, suggesting that that should be put into the process of our guidance to the general manager, that kind of management report, that kind of follow-up be done year over year. I just want to put that, make sure we get that on the table. That was one of the
That's-
suggestions that they had, that we add that to the capital portion of this guidance.
I see that having nothing to do with the guidance. That has to do with mechanics of how one presents figures and so forth. I mean, the budget guidance is what we as a board want to see achieved in it, not the mechanics of how it's presented. I think that can be evaluated, debated. That's more a management function than anything else. I mean, the budget clearly now has a capital section and an operating section. If there's some tweaking that needs to be done to that, I don't think it needs the board of directors to get involved in providing the guidance of how to get set columns up. Just my opinion.
Well, I think part of the point of the Budget and Finance Committee is that if you're gonna look at a capital budget, I mean, and the starting point for looking at any budget is really to look at where you are this year and to be able to determine what capital has been expended and what capital is being expended. You know, in the past, we've always looked at the small capital I'm talking about now as being somewhat transferable. We've had money that's been planned for the out years that we would move and spend earlier and so forth. But I think tracking what the capital expenses are and how much they are is a reasonable part of what the Budget and Finance Committee is supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's being done every month. In addition to the operating budget right now, there is a reserves and the capital is all being tracked internally with accounting. It's rolled up, and so you don't see every expenditure, but the
Yeah,
details of it.
I don't know
Dave, it's
that-
a reporting, that has nothing to do with the budget. That has to do with ongoing operational accounting during the course of the year. Let me just suggest, in the budget books that we all get, there's a Schedule 11, I believe it is it not, Art? That contains not only capital items by department, but each and every specific item is set forth in that capital budget Schedule 11 tab.
Yes, does that show the past year's capital expenses? That's what they were asking for.
That's what they're asking.
They're asking.
But we're talking about the budget.
They're
next year.
asking for well, you know what? You just referenced the budget book that has all this good stuff in it. What they need.
I'm sorry,
is
I thought I was focused on the budget.
What they need to see is what the actual expenditures were from the previous year to have some idea whether or not we've just budgeted the same thing
Okay.
5 times in a row and
Fair
never spent
question.
the money.
Fair question.
That's a fair question.
Fair question.
Greg, go ahead.
This board and the Budget and Finance Committee, at this point in time, does not know what we're gonna be looking at next year until all these evaluations that we're going to get the information on at the end of November comes and gets laid on the table. They found this, they found that, they found that. There, we will be setting up our priorities on what things have to be done. And even maybe the Budget and Finance Committee will change some of their minds on some of the recommendations that they're going to make. So I think this is kind of putting the cart before the horse here. We should be looking and talking about this at the end of November and the first part of December when we know what we're talking about. Otherwise, it's just
Rhetoric.
Not part of this.
words, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Operating budget. any other-
Operating budget.
Yeah.
General focus, again, this is a continuation, I think, of a philosophy. Should emphasize having the availability of the required operational skill sets, appropriate, and by the way, Tom, Terry, and I collaborated on this, so some of these words sound like Verizonese, it may be. But operational skill sets appropriate to an enterprise of our current size and the delivery of quality services while effectively reducing unnecessary expenditures. Process improvements and increased staff productivity should be based on the inclusion of expanded use of technology. One of our priorities, of course, was greater use of technology. And one of the operating philosophies that we've had as a board here for the last several years is to continue to improve the quality of services. I think Bob Thompson, in his role as general manager, has continued to try and upgrade the quality of services, raising the bar, if you will, Bob, has been, I know, one of the things that you've been trying to do on performance of our employees. And we, as an organization, and certainly as a board, have tried to expand the service offerings to our members, longer hours, leaf collection, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's inherent in that general focus. But we also recognize that, there are reducing unnecessary expenditures is key to it as well. So evaluating every department, there's a lot in this general focus paragraph, focusing on how we can more efficiently produce those, either through the use of technology or eliminating redundant services and upgrading and so forth. So that's what that's all about. The next one is simply realistic amenity budgets. I think there was a time back not too many years ago when the budgets contained perhaps projections, or actually budgeted amounts for revenues that were not as realistic as they should have been. And certainly we have been emphasizing the amenity in particular show based on a realistic basis and reflect continuing efforts to increase revenues. Again, the thought here is that it's not just through cost cutting that we're going to be successful in achieving desired financial results, but it's got to be based on expansion of revenues. And that's the accelerator that we've been trying to emphasize. And I know, Bob, that's more than anything else, I think what you have been trying to accomplish is to expand our revenues by broadening the array of services, more hours for dining, improving the menu, et cetera, all the above, to try and get more revenue to improve the bottom line performance, which has a direct impact on the assessment levels. The IRS is included in here as a specific item, must begin to address the potential consequences of the IRS case. The budget should reflect those taxes which would be applicable to the 2013 beach parking operation should the position of the IRS prevail. What that means is essentially that we're not asking to budget $1 million of expenditures and have the assessment impacted by $1 million of additional expenses so that we break even, but rather this is suggesting that the budget should acknowledge that our future operations of the parking should take into account a consequence that may be ongoing taxes. If we have taxable income from those operations, then we ought to build that expense into the operating budget and not ignore it. Now, we don't know what the outcome will be, but at least we can begin to prepare for an outcome that may be negative, at least insofar as the future is concerned. This isn't going to get you $1 million, but it's going to at least acknowledge the problem and take that into account. You can always deal with it in the future. If you don't need it, we can always make some money. So begin to address that in this current 2013 budget by providing within the beach parking operation an increase or some other means, but I think an increase is really what it means.
How about just a contingency fund and an unnamed contingency fund for that matter? We always have contingencies.
The
Well,
idea here.
We don't have
obviously,
any idea of what those
We
taxes will
don't know
be.
what it's going to be.
Why don't we-
Well, we do know what it's going to be. No, I beg to differ with you. We will know, we can compute precisely what the income taxes for fiscal 2013 will be if the income's taxable. It's real simple.
But this
It's
is,
like if you know you're going to make 100,000 or 50,000 or 40,000 next year, you can figure out what your taxes are. We can figure out the taxes on our beach parking for next year.
this is still guidance to the general
Yeah,
manager.
right,
The
right.
guidance is sufficient.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
We
Let
got
me
a
take-
sharp guy sitting down
Fair
there.
enough.
He'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Pete, let me
fair enough.
take it.
I don't think
This-
so.
The staff compensation, this was something I wanted to be, us to be very clear on. Last year, when we wrote the budget guidance to the general manager, we directed him to give a budget impact of a 3% raise. This document here states clearly, the board does not direct, nor does it propose to the general manager to provide raises for the staff. The GM, however, may propose salary increases, raises that in aggregate amount up to 3%, not restricted to any individual employee. The raises need to be tied to specific metric measurements across the board. The reason that we wanted to make a change from last year's wording to this year's was last year's basically forced the general manager to insert a 3% budget increase for salary raises. The salary raise request ought to be based on performance and percentages that he thinks are needed. So that's the reason for this wording. Okay?
Tom, let me just read you last year's language, so there's no mistake. We didn't direct them to have increases, but we did say to budget no more than 3%. Let me read the words.
It was a not to exceed.
Yeah, it is.
It was not to exceed.
Let me read it. Limit aggregate staff salary increases to no more than 3% of total salaries, and ensure that any such increases are granted only on a merit basis
Right.
and not across the board. And that's basically the same guidance that's been given the last 2 years. I think what the general manager has done for purposes of the budget is to insert into each department a 3% amount, not knowing whether that particular department would be 0 or 5% or 1% based on the performance of those particular employees. But we as a board have said, we could have said, put a salary freeze in, but we didn't. I think we need to be fair and reasonable to our employees and also recognize that these are tough economic times for our employees as well as our members. But we have said no more than 3%, cap it at that, so that's what we've said.
All right. Major projects. Yes, I'm sorry.
Where were we on? Operations?
Staff
Yeah.
compensation.
Just the rest of the document.
Staff compensation. Dave, that's on page 2 there, the staff compensation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I read it.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have it with me, but I remember it. I have a different view on the operations section, and you've touched on a number of things, so maybe I'll just hand this out and try and scan over it quickly.
Are we not going to finish the rest of this? Or what?
Well, you finished the rest of that? Okay. I don't know where to comment and where
You
not
need
to.
a copy of it?
It
So
probably
you don't
would,
have with you the,
it would help, but I remember it, so I'm not gonna worry about it so much.
may I share with yours with you, please, with Dave mine? So that's the compensation matter that Tom Terry just
Go ahead,
addressed, right?
finish the
Okay, so, and again, Tom summed it up, 3% aggregate, not limited, based on performance, metrics, et cetera, right? There are only 2 more items. Major projects, as identified in the director's objectives for the current fiscal year, should be guides of planning, projects such as golf drainage and road resurfacing and technology upgrades, reflected in our board priorities established a couple of meetings ago, should be specifically analyzed and included in the budget. And the very last thing is, as Tom Terry mentioned earlier, business plans. The board's review and understanding of the proposed budget would be enhanced by having business plans for all new programs or services, as well as for the operations of our most significant amenities, such as the yacht club and golf. The budget should be accompanied by such business plans, even though they understandably may be preliminary and not completely developed. Last year, we had a couple of initiatives from the general manager, and we as a board thought that it was inappropriate to have those new initiatives, but we would have been better served by having a business plan to support them. And I think one of the criticisms we had of the process last year was there was not adequate business plan support for some of the new ideas and some of the initiatives. So we've specifically asked for that in this document here. And that's really it. That's the.
Now, before we get into Dave's, I also want to bring up 2 issues I remember from, one was, and I'm going to call it zero-based, foundation-based, whatever you want to call it, budgeting. There is a suggestion that we be specific in that the guidance state that we should start with a budget that doesn't simply add up to the amount that the dues are going to be, but we start with a 0 and put in only those things that are required to bring the quality of community that we want.
Like police and fire and
Yeah, well,
parks and recs.
Again, the idea is that you don't start with how much dues you're gonna have and then figure out where you're spending it. It's, you go from some places call it a zero-based, others call it foundation-based. Budgeting
Ground
to grow to what your spending needs to be. That was part of the suggestion as well. I want to make sure that made it to the table for discussion as well. Bill?
Yeah. When we talk about budget and we look at the monthly or the quarterly reports, we always have the statements or the finances are always to budget. To budget is nothing more than a guesstimation of what this is going to cost or revenue that this is going to generate. I think we need to know what those guesstimations are based on. Some criteria, whether it's a trend over the last 3 years in each call center or what, but we need to know what the guesstimation is based on.
And there was also, this kind of got into the weeds a bit, but there was a suggestion that having to do with the yacht club, that it definitely be closed as of January till season opens again. That was part of the guidance from them as well. A lot of that, I think, can have to work its way out in the business plans, but.
Yeah, I don't know how we can make that decision today.
There was also,
We don't want-
using my memory, an issue on compensation. There was that they had in their recommendation. One that they put up for a number of years is that we look at the
Benefits.
the benefits
Yeah.
packet. And also, they talked about, I think, a 0% increase was their recommendation. Am I remembering that
Well,
right?
that's included.
And,
That's, Dave, in
Yeah.
under the operating budget, general focus, Pete went by it pretty quickly, but the last sentence says,
Yeah.
the operational portion of the budget should support the operational segment of the dues, if possible, remaining at the same level
Mhm.
as FY 2012,
Mhm.
Which means no increase to the
which means
operational
no
budget.
increase to the operating budget,
If possible.
if possible.
Right.
If,
And that may not be possible. Again, this is the general manager's budget that we're making some recommendations about.
Sure.
Dave, can you summarize what you?
I'll try. I'll hit some of the issues that, we'll touch on the topics that were in there. I was trying to fix the same, the general topics. My first point was that, that the general manager not assume that last year's budget is a valid starting point for this year's. I believe it contained assumptions, predictions that weren't validated by financial results. And it was formulated in part on the basis of analysis and plans that haven't yet been delivered. We haven't seen them. And, talking about needing business plans for next year is, to me, not a real important point when we haven't seen them for this year. Also, of course, obviously, there will be, and I'm assuming it'll come next month, a lot of things are coming next month, we're going to see a half-year report on the second quarter report, which would have projections for the remainder of the year. Is that at our next meeting, Art? Am I correct? Bob, Art, anybody? Yeah, that's what's supposed to be in them, they're always in them.
I was going to say, I think they're always there, but if you want something in particular, please ask.
No, what I'm asking is, it's the end of the sixth, or the second quarter, and we're going to get a result, which is going to tell us where we're going to stand at the end of the year as best as we can. That's correct statement, isn't it? Okay. In terms of the operating budget, personnel costs, I believe that the guidance should be that the budget of personnel costs shall not exceed those currently budgeted for this fiscal year, and where possible, reduced in those areas where the budget amounts proved unnecessary, which will always happen. What I'm saying is, I don't care about whether or not there's a 3% increase or a 10% increase or a 0% increase. I don't know what it was this year, so I have no reason to look at it next year. What I do care about is the total personnel costs, and that they not exceed what we budgeted last year. Do I think that they were budgeted too high last year? Yeah, but still, that's a starting point. And that includes salary increases, it includes staffing changes, it includes increases in payroll costs. However, all of those things under the control of the general manager, as long as the total payroll costs do not exceed last year's. That should be the guidance.
That's what this says.
I don't think.
Oh, okay.
What you're
You read
saying.
it, that's what it says. It says
What
that-
are you talking about?
That's the guidance that we've got, it says that.
Let me see.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It does not.
It
said,
No, it doesn't.
I'm gonna read it. The
Okay.
operational support of the budget should support the operational segment of the dues if possible, remaining the same level as fiscal year 2012.
Oh,
That
yeah.
means don't raise
It's not dealing with
that portion of
personnel
the budget.
costs, that's dealing with the whole
Whoa,
budget.
whoa, whoa, whoa. What if by, no, it doesn't say that at all.
No, these are two entirely different things.
What Dave is saying is, and echoing what the comment from the Budget and Finance Committee was, issue a directive through the guidance that the general manager's budget total compensation cost will not exceed the amount budgeted for this year. That is to say, if we wanted to expand the operations of the yacht club and actually make money, that might require expending more compensation dollars to have increased wait staff. It may involve hiring a chef. It may involve hiring a floor manager, as been suggested, to better control resources. It may involve a number of things, the intent being to improve the profitability of the operation.
Sort of like we did last year, or this
But,
year.
Dave, if I may, if you take the arbitrary imposition of a cap on expenditures, you don't then have that opportunity. The same thing would be true of any other operation within the association, be it Parks and Recs or expansion of program. I mean, just to impose an arbitrary amount on cap on compensation, and by the way, as I read it here, and as I've looked at it, it includes fringe benefits, medical costs,
Yep.
unemployment compensation,
Exactly.
all the above.
Exactly.
To arbitrarily say you cannot exceed X dollars limits your activity. I thought we had a philosophy of open for business and trying to expand our services to the members, et cetera, so.
Well, you know what? Exactly.
What?
It might involve relooking at that and finding out how much it's costing us. Information that we haven't been able to get thus far this
Who's
year,
we?
despite multiple requests. We are the board of directors, and it's our guidance. And we are the ones that get the reports. And we have asked for information. I have. We can't find out what open for business is really costing us.
So then the board hasn't asked for it, you've asked for it.
No, I've asked for it in board meetings, so it's the same
I mean,
thing.
no, not if the board didn't vote on it. It's the
Well,
same thing
you,
on it.
we don't always, you know what?
What?
Yeah, Bill, we don't always vote on every single sentence that comes up in a board meeting. But let me go on, if
No,
I may.
excuse me. No. We act as a board, not as individuals. So if the board draws a consensus that we want information from the general manager, then so be it.
Well, thank you for letting me have the benefit of all the experience that you've had on the board. I don't know where I was the last 4 years.
Move along, Dave.
Your sarcasm is
Unnecessary.
wasted.
Unnecessary.
Amenity operations must be managed for realistic business expectations rather than marketing slogans, open for business being a marketing slogan. Specifically, each amenity, the staffing and amount of operation or hours of operation that are the basis of the proposed budget must be justified by some hard numbers, the kinds of numbers that I and others have asked for.
You get numbers each month, I don't know why you keep looking at me, Mr. Stevens. Again, if you want something specific, you just.
No, I already have asked, Bob, and I haven't been able to
You
get
get
it.
numbers each month, sir. What,
Bob,
are they?
Bob, the numbers that you give us each month are next to worthless. Then,
Mm.
if you listen to what I've asked for, and you give me those numbers, then we would be able to, I wouldn't be talking about this right now.
We will take that discussion offline. We're talking about the budget guidance document.
Okay. Well, this is specifically what I
Go
believe
ahead.
should be in the
You
budget
go.
guidance document. The performance of current year initiatives that required additional staffing and/or capital investment shall be reported upon separately as a basis for determining whether or not they should be continued into 2012, 2013. It is not possible, perhaps, to separate out an operation like the yacht club and take one portion of that operation and separate it entirely from others. But it's pretty possible. I mean, it is possible to figure out what dollars you're making in the morning during Java Cafe operations, or for other specific things, or for any number of other things, such as open for business in the community center. And those are numbers that I and others have asked for. And, I think before we see this budget, I'd like to know what they are. If you're going to base a budget on continuing that, show us what it's done so far. All right, let me go on. Recommence the road paving program with a budget that, based upon a revision of the schedule the schedule last prepared by Kerry Nelson, the one you showed us in the beginning of this meeting.
That's in here.
And, okay. Request that Casper prepare and present a report on their proposed budget for the next year using the results of this year's golf operations. Again, I would expect them to come in and brief the board on what they think has to be done. Basically,
You didn't cover page 2.
no, I didn't,
Let's
but
get
I
to
thought,
that.
I
No,
thought
no,
we
I-
did.
Well,
I
he
just-
did a
I think
little
what- I
earlier.
think what he's doing
Yeah.
is proposing this as an alternate to what is already on the table. So
I'm
this is,
I'm
this is
suspect,
a complete
okay.
budget guidance, alternative B, I think.
Finish it off.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
let's
don't
go
mind.
ahead. Let's speak to it.
Suspend contributions to the 5-year funding plan until the definitive plan for renovation, rebuilding of the yacht club is in place.
And last-
Period, suspended. If we have one before the budget comes out, not a problem. If we don't, then I'm saying don't put any more money into it.
and the last-
Suspend the action on the golf course. And now here, I'm talking about the,
Drainage.
well, the greens and the drainage program. I say golf course.
You say
and-
any action, so you mean
Haven't taken it.
any expenditure.
Yeah, they haven't had any expense.
Well, it would be, well, an action could even be, it's simply approving a plan.
Suspend any action which could include improving the, so suspend even
Basically-
improving the plan.
Well, suspend it until we get the plan from Casper, until we see a definitive plan.
Okay.
And, I mean, that's only in there because, and the point of that is Casper is our management company. I expect Casper to come in and present the plan to us. I expect their experts are the ones that we hired, and that's who I believe we should hear it from.
Pete, you have a motion?
Yes, I have a motion to, again, it was previously distributed, a motion to approve the attached, and here it is, right here. I move that the OPA Board approve the attached budget guidance to the general manager for the fiscal year 2013. Let the record show that we're talking about the original budget guidance that was in your packets, I think 2 weeks ago, or certainly for the last meeting. And so that's my, but we've, I think, had one amendment to that, which is the insertion of a word in front of the sentence that Dan had proposed, and I think I have no objection to that.
The word any.
Yeah.
Any
So
additional
that's the motion to approve that budget guidance with the insertion of the word that Dan, the modification that Dan had proposed.
Have a second?
Needs a second.
I'll second for purposes of discussion.
Okay, discussion.
I thought we were discussing it.
Um,
You remember at the outset, I
But-
asked whether or not I should put a motion on the table or not, so.
You now discuss
Yeah.
it for a vote.
Yeah, I
Not an
believe,
academic exercise.
you know, as you've already seen, I don't disagree with everything that's in the guidance. I mean, I think I've repeated some of the things that's already in it.
It's pretty consistent with the
I
last couple
think,
of years.
I think that, you know, and it's basically what happened to the budget last year, which, you know, I believe was the worst budget under my 4 years that we've ever had to address. And it was somewhat reflected in how long it took to get through it. I think we need more. I think we need to think this guidance out a little bit more. I think it needs to be more specific. I think it shouldn't be open to interpretation. When the general manager sees it, he should know exactly what we're saying, exactly what we mean, okay, by it. And I think, you know, that's important. So I don't think it's ready yet to be given as guidance.
Other comments?
What?
Terry?
I'm gonna say this, whatever. I think I know why, forever, how many years, everybody's been talking about all these plans, why nothing's ever been done.
Bill?
what specificity, and I agree, there needs to be specificity, what specificity are you looking for that's not specific, not there?
Well, without going through a lot of it in
Specific.
detail, but I think I can cover it by saying one word, that the guidance be contingent upon receiving the information. In other words, here's your guidance, but it's contingent upon receiving this specific types of information. And that's what I tried to cover in this.
So there's none of the budget work done or completed until we have all that information laying on the table.
Well, it depends on whether or not, you get a book that looks like, I won't even pull it out, that,
Right.
and then try and figure it out, or whether or not you have the actual, whether you call them, let's call it business case. I hate the word business plan, but the business cases in some cases. In other cases, it may not be a business case. It may be, hey, here's how people benefit from doing this thing, and here's exactly how much money it's going to cost. Okay, here's the operating cost, here's the capital cost. That's why they're in the budget.
I'd take that one step based on what, in other words, if I'm preparing a budget, I should be able to say, my personnel costs, I'm projecting to be this because there should be a reason like this. What are you using, how are you determining what that cost is going to be?
Well, first of all, if you put the proper limits on, which you may not agree with, if you put the proper limits on it, then you don't have to worry about that too much. I'm all for giving the general manager the flexibility to do what he needs to do within certain bounds. But on the other hand, if you say he just has the flexibility to do what he thinks needs to be done, honestly, there are no bounds, and we can get an unacceptable result. And I believe that happened last year. So,
I've heard a
so
lot
I
of-
would like to prevent it. I would-
But isn't that what the budget work sessions are
Yes,
for?
they are. And this is part of.
And you think just because you're gonna be more specific in this document to Bob, that it's not gonna end up in a book like that?
Oh, it's gonna end up in a book like that?
Okay, well then why are we having this
Of course,
discussion?
of course.
Amen.
All right, any
Well,
other comments?
you'll find out.
Any other comments, questions? I mean,
Well
this
done.
document clearly calls for business plans and business cases and updated numbers. It's very clear that it's called and collected. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Is it 6-1?
6-1.
Thank you.
Okay. Pending action list.
Yes. Here, redistribute this, it's what you had in your packet. I didn't change the date from the last time.
The first one on there, you can go through.
I know, I'll go through these real quick. I'll go through these real quick. Okay, the first item, I'll feed off the advisory committee.
Yeah.
James, do you want-
Oh, I've got that, thanks. Hey, before you get
Yeah.
way into all that,
Yeah.
could you help a slow-thinking Pollock with something here? The top line that says pending action list September 20th,
Oh,
2011.
the S is off.
Is that not, should that not be today's date? Shouldn't it be current?
Well, no, because we
carried
were in
That's why I'm
recess.
asking.
Yes, your question, no, because we're in recess, we were in recess and we've reconvened.
didn't update
And
it.
this was printed for the meeting, it's still part of that meeting the 18th.
Well, I agree,
Should
but
be
it says
October.
September.
Should be
It
October.
said
Well, I just
October
passed out
18th.
when it said October, I knew that.
Oh,
Well,
see, because.
He's got a fresh one.
He just updated.
You were trying to
Yeah,
get
I
it
got
to-
that.
All right.
I
We
You
were
tried
realized.
to give
trying
it
to
to.
use
All
our
right.
own.
I realized that.
Dan, do not refuse this
I
concept.
realize
No,
that.
thank you. I
Yeah.
just didn't know.
Oh, I
where-
understand, I understand. I realized that when I was looking at it last week, and I had to,
It
whatever.
must be Polish because I was looking at the same one.
Okay, let's go.
Anyway, okay, Golf Advisory Committee. Pete, can you update us on this?
Yeah, it's on the agenda, and I think I prefer to deal with it as a separate agenda item.
Okay, we'll come back to you on this.
Okay, then we'll come back to it. County meetings, Ray, do you have anything for us with regard to them?
I'm in touch every week with Jim Bunning, he lets me know if whatever's coming up at the next meeting is gonna involve, and I'll attend most of them.
Okay.
Anybody else that wants to go is welcome to do them, but I'll attend most of the
Okay.
county.
Okay, then in the future, if something comes up that you feel needs to be on the PAL list,
I'll
let me
call
know.
somebody,
Otherwise,
I'm
we'll,
sure, yeah.
we'll take it off.
Bill,
Okay.
could you also be aware that because of the way we've scheduled board meetings, we're not going to see a county commissioner here making
Yes.
reports? So
Yeah, we're aware of
it's
that.
going to have to come
Yeah.
from Ray.
Yeah.
Okay, the fire department thing has been taken care of, it's been signed, sealed, and
That's
delivered?
Yep.
Contract has been
Done.
signed by
Sealed,
both
delivered.
parties. yeah.
Okay, bridge status repairs, Tom.
Been in touch with the county and trying to nail that down. It's not nailed down yet. At our next meeting, we'll have an answer to that.
Okay. The only, it's not on the pending action list, but it's part of our objectives that I've listed here.
Yep.
With regard to one aspect of number 4 there, where it used as an example, the Pines Card Pass concept, where are we with that? Can we expect to hear something with regard to that?
I can discuss it next month. I mean,
Okay.
we updated, I mean, or I can give it to you now in a nutshell if you want. It's up to you.
No, it's when you're ready to imagine. It's just that the concept, I'm excited about it, and I just want to know where we are, whether
Would it be, would it be
I'm sorry.
better if we waited until next
Next
month?
month,
We could
yeah.
have a.
Well, the only question I have on the review and approved plans for IT implementation, that's part of your guidance moving forward. The budget won't be completed next month. I just need to make sure
I
I
guess
understand.
specifically what I'm talking about is the Pines Card Pass concept.
I'll address it at next month's
Okay.
board meeting.
Okay.
Part of the discussion that Bill and I had was at our meetings, and every meeting, we're gonna come back to these 4 topics, put them on the table. If there's something to report or something to talk about, fine. I wanna make sure we stay focused. Part of our energies, at least, around what we said we were gonna spend our time on, and that's these 4 things. Is there any update to any of these 4 things at this point? Otherwise, I'll recognize you. All right, Dave. go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I just wondered if that's all. I mean, in general, well, you just take the one you just brought up, Bill.
Mhm.
Okay, now, shouldn't that simply just go on the list? I mean, it's pending action, it's gonna take, I mean, all the things on the list aren't gonna be done like immediately or the next week or traditionally, I mean, they could be done.
Well, that's why I listed the objectives. I think all these objectives are on the list, things we want, things that we're looking to accomplish or look to be had done.
Yeah, but there's sort of, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I'm talking about the actual thing where there's gonna be a specific action. So,
Well, I think Bob kind of said that.
Yeah.
It's depends on the budget with the IT, and then once that happens, then that card pass can go on the pending action list as
This
a
action
specific.
list, this action list is things we're doing,
Right.
not him.
No, but I mean,
Well,
but
so
it can become
Oh.
a specific on that list for us to ask about.
here,
Right.
the original reason for the pending action list, going back in history, was so that we had a list of things that wouldn't fall down the crack. They didn't disappear, they just, Now, putting them on the list, reminds us each month, and we don't have to go down the list each month, but it reminds us that, yeah, that was a thing, it's still there, we still need to, take care of it sometime. That's the point of the list. So something like, the thing Bill just mentioned would be on the list, because it's to remind us that, hey, next month, Bob's, and if there's a date on it, then we know the time that it's gonna happen. Something that I would put on the list, I know you'd hate me, but I don't care. Carrollton Lane. It's not been resolved. It's not been
It was
resolved?
extensively
Okay.
covered in his general manager's report just
I'd
last
be
week.
happy to
Yes.
spend another hour on Carroll
Yes.
Lane.
Yes,
Just
no.
direct,
Please
no,
don't.
I
But,
can make
but
long
you're,
meetings.
Please don't.
I'm
That's
sorry,
it.
my point seems to be going over
Yeah, well, I
everybody's head.
understand what you're saying, because it
It's-
hasn't been resolved.
It hasn't
Should
been
be.
resolved. It doesn't mean you have to do something this time. It doesn't mean you have to
If it's
talk
on the
about it
list,
next time.
I will do
If,
something.
if it's,
Just-
if it's on the
Mr.
list.
Stevens, if it's on the list, I will take action on it.
Well,
Just be clear on
good.
it. Okay.
Put it on the
Slide
list.
that on
It's
And
no.
we'll get it in
and-
the GM report.
But
and
Tom
sim-
just, Tom
and
just
simply
said this list
say,
is
no
for us.
change.
Oh, no, you'll get an update in detail,
Right?
sir.
If something happens.
Oh, there'll be something.
Well, you're gonna make it
Excuse me.
happen. Okay, I
Point of
don't care.
order,
But
folks.
Bob, I don't
Point of
care.
order.
Excuse me.
Point of order, Bill. So I have clear guidance on this. My understanding, a month ago, a month and a half ago, that, the, pending action list was for the board of directors.
Correct.
Things that we're supposed to be following up on. Correct.
Oh,
Right, things that we are involved with. Correct?
The original
That's why I
concept
thought-
was that years ago, there were a lot of things that were on the table that were, that, like he said, fell through the hole.
I understand.
And the board wasn't aware
I
of
know
it
that.
until it was too late.
Right.
So I think it's not just for us, it's also for Bob. But he's usually on top of most of this stuff. We just want to be on top of it, see what's going on.
We want to be reminded how on top of things he is, right?
in terms
Or
of
not.
history, yeah, that's true. In terms of history, it was originally, believed that the general manager ought to have a list like that. And when he didn't, the board created the list. And Ray's right, it's primarily for the board. Now, some of the things that the board will want to track in our own heads are the things that Bob is on the hook for doing. That's all it is. It's just a list to remind the board that these things are still out there and need to have something done
These
about
are the
them.
important things that we need to be.
We're all saying the same thing.
That's right, and so we shouldn't be shy about putting things that concern us on the list, you know?
I'm not shy about putting anything on the list. If
Yeah.
anyone wants something on the list,
In
let me know.
in all historical perspective, what does this board want to do with this list?
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank
Now,
you.
Let's give
the
you some
list is
direction.
either gonna have things we're working on, that we're responsible for, in the general manager's report. In that report, we will get the updates on the things that he's working on.
I'm pretty sure Bob keeps his own list.
Exactly. And if there's something in the
Yeah.
general manager's report that he doesn't address, that we need information on, we'll
Put it on the list.
Pete?
You know, I prefer to think that we're all working on the major problems together, the
Yeah,
general
that's
manager
right.
and the board. And I, for one, would rather see a list that has everything. If there are
It's
important things,
inclusive.
Carrollton Lane, that are in the hands of the general manager right now, I think that's appropriate to include on the list. So let's not say his and ours, and we're all one here. So I'd have a list that contains the most significant things that we want to keep track of, period. And somebody made an earlier comment that you don't need to go down the list every item every month.
No.
I mean, you know, it could be as simple as, anybody got any updates on the things that are on the PAL list? Oh, yeah, by the way, I want to ask Bob about this, so.
With one exception on that, though,
Go ahead.
Mr. Gamzak. If it's on the list and it's in writing, you can rest assured I will give you a detailed report on it. Because the last, and please hear me out.
Go ahead.
It shows in every meeting, and it hasn't led up this meeting. Mr. Stevens does not believe I report accurately or fairly. So I will make sure, as I did with the meeting last week, I will give a detailed report on whatever you request. Because the last thing I'm gonna be told is I'm not giving enough information.
That's,
It's just not gonna happen.
that's-
So
I
if it's on the list, I will comply.
All right. Bill
Bob,
and I
I
will-
find that insulting, and
Okay.
and you're okay with that. And I find it childish too, at the same
Okay.
time, to say, well, you know, you're not going to, I'm going to give you a detailed report whether you want it or not.
No, sir.
If,
That's not
if,
what I've
if,
said.
if my name is, or if an action I have is on a list, come on, Bob. I mean, you know, we've done this for 4 years, for crying out loud.
Point of order, this
Point of
has
order,
something to do
please.
with it.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
No, I think it's we will work, as we have in the agenda, and working with Bob when we talk about his general manager's report, So the things that we want to make sure we have updates for, we do that through Dan and myself and Bill, and we're doing the agendas, we talk about what's going on, we're all on the same team. I don't want to put a situation where we have 4 and 5 hour meetings every month, updating on every single thing so that we don't get out of whack. At the same time, there are critical issues that need to be updated. We will manage our way through that. Moving on, Golf Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I had distributed earlier. A little background here. Well, you all have the motion here, and as I explained very briefly earlier, the intent was to bring this up originally at the October meeting, which was last Tuesday, but frankly, because of out-of-town, inability to talk to a number of people that I needed to talk to, wanted to talk to, and Tom Terry's absence, he and I simply couldn't get together prior to last Tuesday's meeting, so it was not on the agenda. I said to Tom when we finally got together, why don't we bring it up at the November meeting? As it turns out, we're having a continuation of the October meeting. So here it is. I have talked to a number of people. I've talked to every member of the Golf Advisory Committee. I've talked to and met with, actually, I was invited to attend the last meeting of the Members' Council, and they meet again tomorrow, actually. And actually, we have 2 golf advisory committees. No, we have 2 committees that are involved with golf. The history of it's contained here. For those of you who are relatively new to this, the board resolution C11 was adopted in 2009, as it's set forth here in the background information. That didn't work out the way everybody thought it should. In March of 2011, having nothing to do with outsourcing, by the way, March of 2011, outsourcing was not teed up yet. But it was felt that we ought to have a formal golf advisory committee as existed for other things such as aquatics and clubs and so forth. And so the board at that time passed that resolution on March 10th at the meeting. Then, of course, we did engage Billy Casper Golf and establish a different kind of relationship for the management of the golf function. At that point in time, the Golf Advisory Committee, the 9 members who had been appointed by the board at that meeting on March the 10th, simply became inactive, and has been inactive since. And I, for one, have been getting questions about what's going on with that, and I think we as a board need to deal with it, not just let it sit there. So my recommendation, after talking to a number of people, is to sort of disband that committee and have the current Members' Council, which those of you with the history around Ocean Pines, it's a different name for the old Board of Golf Governors. It's elected by the members of the Golf Association and accountable to them, and they deal with a number of things. They are effectively, right now, communicating with Casper and with Bob Thompson as the general manager. I am the liaison to, quote, golf. And I've been asked if this would mean that we would continue to have a liaison responsibility, and I hope, my answer is yes. I think golf is important. We had a good meeting here earlier this afternoon between Bob Thompson and myself, and the chair of that particular committee. Is he still here? Yes, he is. Bill, thanks. And I think that continuing Members' Council can facilitate the necessary communications while at the same time respecting the management contract that the association has with Billy Casper Golf. We certainly, as a board, I think, have done a fairly good job in recent years of stopping the micromanage is a term that's been used around here. The general manager manages the association. We as the board, or the board of directors, have set policy. On the other hand, so I have simply put this motion forward that the board of directors hereby declare as inactive the Golf Advisory Committee and revoke the appointments made to the committee in March of 2010, effective immediately. The alternative is to simply do away with it permanently, but there may be a time in the future where it's necessary to bring that committee back.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that
Thank you.
motion for
Okay. And so that's what we've done here. It would say, and I've talked to each and every one of those members. Those 9 members were appointed. One, Mayor McCarthy,
So
has
the
moved out of
committee
town,
itself
so
agrees
forth.
with
So
what this
the
says.
committee itself agrees.
All right.
They see this as a
I have
positive.
a motion and a
So-
second discussion. Bill?
I'm opposed to golf not having an advisory committee. Advisory committee, give an opportunity for OPA members to communicate through the committee to the board of directors. Advisory committees, their focus or their charge is not to make policy. Their focus is to make recommendations or communicate to the board of directors. If you do this, then the only folks who have input to voice their concerns in an organized manner are the people who are members to the amenity of golf. We have a lot of people here in Ocean Pines who play golf at our golf course who might not have a membership. With an advisory committee who has a responsibility of directly reporting or making recommendations, issuing concerns to board of directors, those folks don't have a voice.
Dave?
Yeah, Pete and I talked very briefly about this earlier. That's the reason I was late.
Blame it on Pete.
It was Pete's.
I was here on time.
You know, I've been involved in all the permutations of this from the very beginning. I think, let me start out by saying, though, that we should not get the idea that the members' council is an advisory committee. You're correct about that, Bill. I believe 100%. Going back, that was a bad thing. At one time, it took a lot of hits, Bill Smile, you know, and we changed it to make it different and have a real advisory committee, and then that kind of got diverted, whatever happened to it. But it's defunct now. It's not in existence, and so it's reasonable, I think, to, what did you say, suspend it, or what was the
Inactive.
word? Inactive?
Declare it as
Declare it
inactive.
inactive.
Declare it as inactive.
It's reasonable to declare it inactive because it is inactive, as a matter of fact.
And I understand that, but by the same note, Rec and Parks Advisory Committee has been inactive, and it hasn't been, and through efforts of the new director and the board liaison to Rec and Parks, that advisory committee is being reactivated, and I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be alive and well. So I don't know, are we giving, who decides whether we're not going to have an advisory committee? Because the golf members council doesn't feel we need to be an advisory committee, they decide that? Or
No,
what's-
don't
we're going the
I'll
opposite
be
way.
back.
We're going the
I'll
Don't
be
say
back. I'll be back. Well,
that.
I'm
Please,
trying-
I'm ported, I
I know,
can't,
no, no, no,
Run that
I know
tape
that.
back.
I
I
won't
don't
go,
think you
get
meant
to
to
go
say
there
that.
anymore.
But what I'm trying to say here is because something has been dormant, do we allow that to remain dormant, or do we have a responsibility to regenerate it?
I think we do have a responsibility to regenerate it. I'm in agreement with you, but I think we need to think of exactly about, you know, we're dealing with something a little different
I
now
understand that.
with Casper.
I understand.
And we don't want somebody looking over their shoulder and, you know, I mean, exactly. But on the other hand, there are some serious issues, many of them technical issues, that the board kind of needs some support on. I mean, for example, some serious, you know, we just heard them. I mean, 1.75.
Yeah.
You know, the problem with the course, the greens and so forth. Where do we get our advice from? And now I'm hoping, you know, it's mainly Casper. But
Right.
where do we get it from a member, or a OPA member's
That's right.
perspective? Yeah.
Good.
My simple brain sees that we have two groups doing the same thing, pop a balloon on one and let the other group do what we ask them to do.
Just speaking
No.
from history with respect to the golf course, Bill, so that you have the whole background, a fellow by the name of Jim Clendenning was one of the first members of the Ocean Pines Golf Course and Golf Club, and he formed the first board of golf governors. Most country clubs with golf courses will have a board of golf governors consisting of golfers who look at how golf operations happen, what condition the courses are in, what things are charged, what kind of tournaments they have, and all of the other minutia that goes along with running a golf course. We have now decided as a community to go out and hire Casper Golf and written them a very long contract, of which I've been slowly slogging my way through, to do all of those things. One of the critical things for Casper is to maintain a close working relationship with the people who actually play golf, which is why we have what Pete has already, what's it called now, the Golf Members Council?
Members Council, right.
Golf members council.
Okay, so there's feedback going to Casper from the people who use the facility on a regular basis. We also have on the board of directors a specific person who has been identified as the liaison to golf. Not to golf special anything but golf, and that's Pete. So if I, as a citizen of Ocean Pines, want to put a comment into the board, I'll either do it via public comments, or I'll call Pete and say, hey, I've got something you need to hear about golf, and get onto the table with the board. I guess what I'm trying to say is I understand what you're saying, because I was sitting here when we reactivated that advisory committee concept. But it is something that it has a very difficult time functioning and doing a job, because most of the people really aren't wildly enthusiastic about where they are.
First of all, as far as your history, outside of not knowing who the first gentleman was, I know all
But
about,
that's-
I know all about
I-
Bog,
I
I know
know.
all about
Okay.
that. Okay, but what I'm talking about is the advisory
Gotcha.
committee concept.
Gotcha.
That's where I am, the advisory committee concept. And, does our membership need, and the golf, no, not need, but need a outlet. So you're telling me that instead of a advisory committee, the members' council will work through UP if there are concerns?
Or a general manager,
Or the-
or
well,
me,
you would
or
bring-
I'm a
Not-
facilitator, I'm a
I'm-
facilitator.
I'm-
Not the members' council.
Okay, so,
Well,
where I am is where, if we're the only people, the boots on the ground, the people who are playing on that golf course are the people who really know concerns.
They know
So-
the most.
Yeah, so what vehicle do they have to communicate that to us who have, one of our main responsibilities of the few that are thing is you give direction to the general manager. So if there's, if in past, an advisory committee would make a recommendation to the board of directors that required action from the general manager, the board of directors would give the general manager that information and that direction to explore or whatever.
Well, this time
So-
last year, you would have been right on the button, but the general manager's not running the golf course.
I understand that, but the general manager communicates concerns to the golf
let
course
me
operator.
understand.
We understand Bill's issue.
Yeah,
Pete, you want-
let me try and address your issue in a different way. In the interest of full candor here, I started out with an opinion based on some conversations that I had initially, that first of all, the Golf Advisory Committee should be exactly what we're recommending, whether it exists, there's only two groups. I then turned to the function of the membership council and said, what really should happen is that group should be constituted as the Golf Advisory Committee, and the members of that be appointed by the board to the Golf Advisory Committee reconstituted. And that as those individuals would roll off, they would be replaced by, as every other committee here, advisory committee in Ocean Pines, by the board of directors appointing them. And don't forget that each committee person who is appointed by the president and approved by the board requires a sign off of both the committee chair and also the liaison. So that's the track I was going down, and then all of a sudden I began to get some other views on that, and particularly Casper's view, and I ended up with a different conclusion. Bill Hickey knows, because when Bill and I first talked, it was with the alternative A, and now we're alternative B. And here's the reason. Golf is the only function where we've outsourced the management of it. And we really need to respect that outsourcing the management of it. The other thing is, in terms of giving to the members' council the authority to be advisory committee, part, whatever it is, that's one slice of what we need to make that operation successful. As Casper points out to me, look, oftentimes the interest of the entire 8,442 members of Ocean Pines is contrary to the interests of 200 or 300 people. So from a marketing standpoint, a filling the golf course standpoint, there's gonna be some tension, and that's normal. So, in terms of advice about, and recommendations about the course and conditions and communicating problems, absolutely, and there is a mechanism to achieve that. On the other hand, Casper, under contract to us, who has said basically, make this thing successful and have it make money in the interest of the entire association, all the members, you need to do the things that need to be done. And we're not gonna tell you what those are. We hired them for several reasons. Number one, their marketing expertise, right? Their management expertise, right? Which we didn't quite frankly have. So we've outsourced that now. And I don't think anybody would say that the members of the current Golf Advisory Committee or the Members Council has the appropriate experience in marketing golf and in agronomy and management. I mean, so what advice, so we met today as a follow-up to a variety of conversations I've had with Bill Hickey. And Bill, I'm going to ask if the president would be willing to suspend the rules for a moment. If Bill would be, are you willing to say, you want to respond in any way? I'm not forcing you to do, I'm not.
No, I'm listening to the dialogue.
Okay, but I think it'll work, Bill, as we talk about from a communication standpoint, and how it's working
All right, we've
now.
got a-
I think it'll
we've got
work.
a- Hang on, Bill, go ahead.
Okay. A problem that I don't think the process addresses, well, a potential problem, potential issues. Last week, Bob presented a plan to generate revenue for the golf course, the 40 people, $25,000, whatever that. There are people that are interested in that, or that's a possible way of doing things, but they have some questions about, well, what happens if this, then what happens if someone dies, or what happens to that, or so on and so forth. Those folks had no vehicle to address that concern. But I'm aware, if it's advisory committee, if you go to advisory committee, which will come to the board of directors.
Directly to the general manager.
So, well, I understand that, but we want 25, 30 people to contact the general manager directly.
I recognize Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, I didn't get to finish my last history comment, which will maybe help get you there. Under Clendenning, the Golf Board of Governors became the de facto advisory committee to the board. The board set them up in that position.
I understand.
Okay, it was a few years ago that the advisory committee was split off again, and it got interesting. In fact, if you read through the contract with Casper, the general manager and the board of directors have the responsibility for managing that, with the general manager being the lead person in management. Do we want to get to the point where we're stepping into day-to-day management issues with the golf course, which is what sounds to me like you're bringing up?
No.
Well, if it's a general comment from the community, that's why we all sit on the board. Somebody's gonna pick up the phone and call you or me or Pete or Tom and say, hey, what's going on over there? Go find out. If it's not a general issue, if it's a specific operational issue, then yes, he should be getting those calls. It's
No,
his baby.
I'm not talking about an
Let me just,
operational thing.
and there's no one else can respond to that. Don't forget, Bob Thompson laid out for us at the last meeting, last Tuesday. I'd not heard it before, and he laid it out for the board as an idea. There's no vehicle where you go to for a source of information, it's an idea.
Oh, I understand
So,
that.
so the existence of some advisory committee to go, that people can go to flesh out questions, that's simply not appropriate.
Okay.
Well, suppose this is implemented, is what I'm talking about.
Well, if it's implemented, it'll be approved by the board of directors. If there is to be such a plan, it'll be developed, it'll be rolled out, there'll be, what do you call it, Q&A sessions, introductory sessions. There will be vehicles to accomplish that, because it's gotta be sold, Bill. It's gotta be sold.
All right, I'm gonna suspend the rules, and I'm gonna let Bill talk.
His view would be helpful. Suspend the rules. Bill Hickey,
Bill Hickey.
do you have any comments that you might offer?
Yes, I do, I guess. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bill Hickey, and I live at 74 Ingham Lane, and I am the elected president of the Members Council, which today is 303 members who are both full-time, afternoon, and members of the golf course. This organization was put together, changed our bylaws to take away responsibilities that at least our bylaws had that were in conflict with resolution C11. or
C11, right,
C whatever,
right.
Which formed the golf advisory. So what we do today as members and council is, when you multiply the amount of revenue that 303 golfers bring in, we represent a fairly large piece of the revenue that Ocean Pines receives from residents. And our interest is to just to remain a group that can bring some added value to the golf course, which we do in tournaments, in our men's league and ladies' leagues, and as well as charitable things that we do to just keep the golf club as part of Ocean Pines' responsibility. When Pete talked to me, I was away a month ago, and this all came up as an issue. His first proposal was that we, the Ocean Pines Golf Members Council, be the conduit to answer or have some direct reporting, if you will, to the board of directors. I have talked further with Pete and with Bob today, and I think the consensus is, and the right way to go is, we don't want to interfere with what Casper's responsibilities are, or what the board of directors and Bob Thompson's responsibility is. We just want to have a direction and a vehicle to bring our issues, if we can bring them right to Damien, that's the best part of the responsibility. But also so that we can keep you folks kind of plugged in too. And I think the establishment of a golf liaison who can attend our meetings but not have us as a reporting end of it is the right way to go. And I think that's something that our members would support as well.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I think just following up on what Bill said and rethinking it, or not rethinking it, but thinking it out fully, I think we don't need a general advisory committee in that sense. I think with Casper, I mean, they take care of one end of it, at least from a member's perspective, and of course, members see other players too. I think the community input has to come in through Bob Thompson. And basically, he's got to be, unfortunately, the one to, well, not unfortunately, it's part of the job, is to respond to the questions that come in from the broader community or complaints or whatever, and make sure that Casper's fulfilling their contract. I think that we also, and this is the thing that's been sticking in my head, it's not without possibility that we will need some expertise as a board brought in to solve some of the difficult problems. I mean, certainly the problem of what to do about the current situation in the golf course, getting Casper's detailed recommendations, looking at what the alternatives are, it's not impossible to think that we might want some independent advice. But I don't see that as a committee doing that. I mean,
There's no such expertise at the committee level to do that.
We don't have, you don't have really the expertise, and I think you would, but you could form a group or an ad hoc, whatever, advisory group to do that, so.
I'll give you my sense on this at this point, and then, Bill, with your approval, I'll call the question. I think your issue is valid in that how does the general public get an input, how do they get to us? I think, as Dan had said and others, we represent, our phones ring, I'm already getting emails about the plan that supposedly we already approved, which we haven't done. That's okay. We want input from folks. We're making it inactive if we're not disbanding it. If in fact we find that we do need to create an opportunity for a non-golfer, a non-member group to be able to have some input into it, then we can come back and redo it.
Okay, well, I've seen the members council in action personally. They do a wonderful job, they do an excellent job, but I'll vote no because I really believe in the advisory
That's okay.
concept.
All right, I'm gonna call the question. All those in
Can
favor?
I have a minute before you do that, on that same subject?
Go right
Sorry to butt in, but Bill can tell you when the fog, so to speak, when that split finally came, and the advisory committee was appointed by the board, there were some changes made. You had a new resolution. And it felt very strongly by the board that was in at that time. I was the member, I was the liaison to the bog when that happened. I was told that since that's no longer an advisory committee, that I cannot any longer be a liaison to that. So I became the liaison to the committee that is now disappointed. All I'm saying is that there may be some little actions by the board that are necessary to correct that situation. I agree with what's happening, and I think that it's true, but they probably should have a liaison, but if they're not an advisory committee, perhaps they can't, unless you do something different.
Well, just to answer that particular situation, just as we have Ray appointed to be our liaison to the fire department is not an advisory committee to the board, but he is the liaison to the fire department. In this case, you'll be the liaison to this other group that's not an advisory. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Fair enough.
6-1.
All right, I have, we took care of the advisory committee appointments. For that, I will seek an adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I gotta go home.
You're not going somewhere, are you, Vince?
I gotta get
You
home
up
and
late?
be back here for 7 o'clock.
Oh, that's right, 7 o'clock, yeah.
Where's that gonna be, right here?
It's one of the rooms here, it's one of the rooms here. Not sure which one.
You can do that.
I guess you can.
Yep,
We're not allowed to talk.
Yeah,
thank God.